about 2,4-D. That's the basis of Agent Orange. So unfortunately now, the chemicals that they're using on the genetically modified crops aren't working anymore on these weeds. They become super weeds now. So now the Monsanto and Syngenta, major genetically modified players, have decided that they need to make plants that can withstand 2,4-D. Now these are the chemicals I was just telling you that they spray on the clear cuts because it's the gnarliest herbicide, the only thing that will kill blackberries. They're talking about spraying that on your whole entire food crop system. If it doesn't say organic and it has soybeans, corn, sugar, then it contains a massive amount of herbicides and pesticides, not safe to eat. I know that's a horrible way to start this, right? But when I went to start my organic farm, I couldn't spray any of those things on my crop for 3 years to make sure that it would dissipate out of the soil. So what I'm saying here is when they spray that on every single clear cut that you see, and then it rains, then it's going right into the rivers. So what our group is working on is called community rights, right? Our name here is Community Rights Lincoln County. So we're basically a few members here. Do you guys want to raise your hands, people in our group? So you're almost outnumbered. But, right, what we're working on is an ordinance that would outlaw all aerial pesticide spraying in the county. And so what's happened so far is that big companies, right, Monsanto, right, everyone when they hear about Monsanto, they think of genetically modified food, right? No one thinks that they're the ones that invented PCBs. They're the ones that invented Agent Orange. And what they did in the 90s is rebranded themselves as a food company. What they are they're in control of the government. So we feel like the only way to stop that is through local community initiatives. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a local law in our county that would outlaw aerial pesticide spraying because we feel it violates our civil rights. Because we have the right not to be poisoned in our home.
Is the highway department used in those kind of chemicals as well?
Oh yeah.
Not
every
just
time
agriculture, but
every time you see that little brown strip on the side of the road.
Yep.
So our group basically is part of a 8-pronged attack. There are 8 different counties that are working on similar ordinances. Josephine County down in southern Oregon actually has a similar ban on pesticides, and what they're doing is they're not banning you from using pesticides. They're banning corporate agriculture and the county from using pesticides. So we're not about coming to get your rights. We're talking about the rights of giant land-holding corporations that have basically turned our woods into a factory farm. And it's too expensive and inconvenient for them to hand spray. So then they poison you so they can make an extra $2 an acre.
It's also perfectly possible to not spray at all and to simply cut the weeds by hand that you don't want to grow there if that's what you're going to do, to grow the trees that you want to grow.
Well, I think that's a great point because back in the 80s, a friend of Maria actually was poisoned. And she wrote a great book about the poisoning that was going on up in Five Rivers, which happens to be right outside of Alsea. That book was so strong that they outlawed aerial pesticide spraying on all federal forests. It's completely illegal to do that on federal land because it's not safe. Unfortunately, our timberland that's owned by Hancock, which happens to be the largest landholder in the planet, and Plum Creek, one of the 3rd largest timber companies in the planet, or right around there, right? They own 90% of our county. They pay 3% of the property taxes here. So we are all subsidizing them, right? We're all paying for them to use our roads, to drive their log trucks up. So what ends up happening is we're paying them to poison us. And that's where we decided that enough is enough. So what we do, real simple, we write a local law, we take it to the voters. All we need is 2,000 signatures, and we can get this law on the ballot. Now, these laws really scare them, because we're not going to the legislators. We're not going to the senators. We're actually making a local law that says we have more rights in our community than the corporate landholders do in our community. And the way we base it on is our civil rights and our Oregon State Constitution that says we have the right to be healthy, safe, and happy. And unfortunately, they're violating that right on a daily basis. So we meet every 2 weeks. It's not like a big kind of like, talk about all this crazy stuff. It's just kind of group, hang out. We don't get a ton done, but it's really nice. We meet at the Visual Arts Center in the upstairs there. And so it's a nice little room with the ocean view. We hang out and we discuss how to move forward. We felt like the best way to get people involved was by having classes like this that would get people from the community involved with us and show you what we're about. So I'm going to start on that now. So, like I said, I've been gardening and a long time, and my mom even longer. So I was going to bring some books. I guess I forgot them, but Steve Solomon, if you've never heard of him, you can Google him. He wrote a book in 1978 and it was called Growing Vegetables West of the Cascades. That book has been reprinted numerous times since then. And it's kind of the original book that shows you every different vegetable, how to grow it, when to harvest it, what kind of soil it likes. And back in 1978, he came up with the Steve Solomon soil mix. So Steve's latest book is called The Intelligent Gardener. And I want to talk a little bit about that book because it's a really crucial book for you guys when you're thinking about starting a garden to realize what is available to you. So Steve, I'm going to kind of make this short, but basically realized that his soil, he'd been adding his mix forever, and it was just compost and all the things you could do, and it wasn't as good as some of these vegetables that he had when he was on vacation in Fiji. And he knew when he was in Fiji, he had all these problems. His teeth weren't very good, he had weird achy joints, and he goes to this island, not organic, conventional produce, and all this stuff started disappearing. All these problems that he was having with his teeth disappeared. What he realized that the soil minerals of this volcanic island were so rich that the food that they were growing was actually better for you than the food he had been growing in his garden for 20 years. So that was a big eye-opener. In fact, his last book, I think he wrote 2 years before The Intelligent Gardener came out. And the reason that he felt like he had to get this information out there is because not enough people think about the minerals in their soil. So what he advocates, and what I'm going to advocate to you, and you can go to a number of sources. I was actually going to put if you go to our website, I'll have a link to these soil testing laboratories. So if you don't have a garden yet, or even if you do, go and find yourself a spot where you can dig up a good sample. You can go to multiple spaces in the garden if you want. Dig up a good sample, you send it off. It's $20 to have your soil analyzed. Right? So that's what he recommends above more than anything, is getting your soil test, and then you can kind of dial everything in. But if you're not going to do that, he gives basically this mix. And so when we talk about this mix, he calls it a complete organic fertilizer. So what is a complete organic fertilizer? Right? When you start your garden, the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what your soil is like. What I do is I take a bunch of shovelfuls, turn it over, knock down all the weeds, turn it over again, and then you kind of break up the topsoil. Around here, you're probably going to have sand under the topsoil. So you want to break all that topsoil up in and mix that up. So the first thing you'll notice around here is that we have a very sandy soil, which is great for some crops. I mean, just marvelous for carrots, asparagus,
Alder.
right? So what I recommend then is to take the down-to-earth natural compost if you don't have any, or if you have your own compost, right? He says that if you have a really nice compost, that you only need a 1/4 inch thick layer of compost. And that's a really nice, he calls it hummified compost. It's kind of this middle section is where I'm at right now, gardening with COF. Because I kind of wanted to give you an idea of what it was before we jumped into the nuts and bolts of it. So basically, if you took all your soil, you turned it over, you put a 1/4 inch of really nice compost, which you can buy at the co-op, and it's in a big bale, and you just spread that over a 1/4 inch thick, then I take my complete organic fertilizer, right? And whatever you end up with, it doesn't really matter, but say you have it, I just take it, I take the bag, right? So this is lime, oyster shell. So I take the bag, I open it up, and I just go like this. And you just kind of use your hand, and you really just kind of gauge it, and you just want a nice dusting on top of your whole entire garden bed. So you got your compost first, then you take your complete organic fertilizer, right? If you're using Steve Solomon, it has lime in it. If you're using another one, or it really can't hurt to just add lime every single time, because what that does is it helps with your soil pH. And I'm not going to get into that a lot, but just know that it helps break down clay, and it helps get your soil less acidic. So if you're going to use the complete organic fertilizer, you don't need to add lime. So now, when we go back up to the top here to make COF, this is enough to cover 100 square feet. So that's not a lot. That's 10 by 10 of garden, right? But this is the basis that you can take, and we're talking about growing beds, not just your trails and everything. This is like your beds, so you can kind of break it down that way. If you're worried about burning your plants, I mean, that's something that a lot of people worry about when they're fertilizing is, am I going to put on too much and I'm going to burn my plants? You know, one of the nice things about using organics is it's really hard to burn with it. It's hard to give it too much, right?